I'm giving you one warning, immediately, or you'll face fines, legal action, and serious consequences.
You're making a mistake. This is my private property and you have no authority over it.
You don't get to ignore community standards. You'll comply with HOA rules whether you like it or not.
You're wrong. HOA has absolutely no jurisdiction here.
This is your final notice. Vacate this property immediately, or we'll begin enforcement procedures today.
I'm not leaving. This land belongs to me.
My grandfather built that bridge in 1961. And it shows. As she looked me up and down, torn flannel, sawdust, dirt beneath my nails. Oh my God, you even dress like the bridge. Her face twisted. Rusty, cheap, falling apart. It passed inspection 7 months ago, Mrs. Davenport. I don't care about your inspections. I've wiped my shoes on things worth more than you. That pile of scrap comes down whether you like it or not. It's my property. Sweetheart, everything on this ridge answers to me. 3 months later, she hired an excavator and ripped my grandfather's bridge apart while I was an hour away. What she forgot was that the bridge was the only road into her own neighborhood, and 38 families were about to learn that the hard way. Have you ever watched a woman destroy the only thing connecting her world, then beg the man she insulted to put it back? Drop a comment, hit like, and let me take you back to where this started. Stay with me. There's a gorge in Patrick County, Virginia, a 52-foot drop carved by Kettle Creek through limestone and red clay. It splits my family's land down the middle. On the west side are 320 acres of timber and pasture my grandfather Amos Jennings bought in 1953 with cash from 14 years of logging wages. On the east was another 160 acres until a developer bought it in 2007 and built a community for people from Northern Virginia who wanted to pretend they discovered rural living. My name is Wyatt Jennings.
I am 48.
I lived here all my life except for 18 years with the Virginia Department of Transportation, where I became a Level 2 bridge inspector. I inspected 247 bridges. I know what failure looks like before it happens, the difference between surface weathering and structural decay, and I've never been wrong about which one I was seeing. I retired early in 2018 because my father's health was failing. Dad, Dale, had managed our selective harvest timber business since Grandpa Amos died in 1994. He thinned rather than clear-cut, planted replacement stock, maintained fire roads, and kept the forest healthy enough for the Virginia Department of Forestry to use our property as a sustainable timber management demonstration. Dad believed in leaving things better than he found them. He died of pancreatic cancer in late 2019, quick and cruel. I inherited the land, equipment, timber contracts, and one important bridge. The gorge runs north to south for roughly 3/4 of a mile. There is exactly one place to cross without rappelling down one side and climbing the other. Grandpa Amos built a bridge there in spring 1961 because he was tired of driving 7 miles around the gorge to reach the east side timber stands. He wasn't a trained engineer, but 20 years in logging had taught him load span stress and weight distribution the way a farmer learns soil, by watching what holds and what breaks under real weight. He salvaged 4 steel I-beams from a Norfolk and Western rail spur near Martinsville. Each was 42 feet long, 14 inches deep, and about 2,000 pounds. A crane operator from Floyd set them across 52 feet of open air on concrete abutments. Amos poured into holes he jackhammered from a limestone. The deck was 3-inch wide oak bolted to steel cross members with hot-dipped galvanized carriage bolts. Black locust railings sat in steel sleeves and were strung with cable. The bridge was 16 feet wide and carried loaded logging trucks without flexing. A county engineer rated it at 20 tons in 1963. Amos maintained it every spring, replaced worn boards, retorqued bolts, and painted the beams with rust-preventive coating every 3 years. When he couldn't do it, Dad took over. When Dad got sick, I did. By the time I inherited it, the bridge had stood 58 years. It had carried logging trucks, cattle trailers, hay wagons, pickups, school buses, and, starting in 2008, the daily traffic of 38 families in a subdivision that could not exist without it. Dad sold the east side timber parcel in 2007 to Marcus Thornton, a developer from Roanoke. Marcus saw century-old oaks as rooftops, cul-de-sacs, and quarterly returns. He platted Ridgerist Heights, 38 lots, a stone entrance sign, a community well, and prices starting at $420,000. But the ridge had beautiful views and no road. The only vehicle access from the county highway crossed Grandpa Amos Bridge. The alternative was a 14-mile detour over Saddleback Mountain on a Forest Service road gated from November through April and turned to mud after rain. or blasting a quarter-mile of limestone at a cost of $1.2 million. Marcus came to Dad's kitchen table needing a legal right for future homeowners to cross. Dad agreed on conditions. His attorney, Roy Kessinger, had practiced real estate law in Patrick County for 37 years and knew the difference between lending someone a truck and signing over the title. Roy drafted a use license agreement, not an easement, but a revocable license. It said the bridge and road remained Jennings' private property. The license was personal to Dale Jennings and non-transferable after his death. It expired automatically. Use could never create a prescriptive easement or public right-of-way, and the HOA had to maintain a $2 million liability policy. Any breach, including interference with Jennings' property, terminated the license. Dad signed because he was a good man. Marcus signed because he had no other option. Roy kept the original in a vault inside a manila envelope labeled in Dad's handwriting. Bridge license do not lose. When Dad died, Roy told me the license expired the moment his heart stopped. Every car crossing afterward was technically trespassing. I continued voluntarily. I charged nobody, maintained the bridge and road, and let 38 families cross twice a day. Roy urged me to formalize it. I told him these were my neighbors and decency didn't need paperwork. He looked over his glasses and said, "Your father said the same thing, and he was right, until someone came along who didn't deserve the decency." Pamela Davenport moved into Ridgewest Heights in spring 2021. Lot 17, the biggest house on the ridge, 4,200 square feet of stone and cedar, a wraparound deck, and a sunset view real estate agents would kill to photograph. She came from Lan, Virginia, where people measured worth by the square footage of their mudrooms and called anything west of Leon County the sticks. She was also one of the most beautiful women I'd seen. Dark auburn hair, green eyes that could shift from warmth to cruelty, and a wardrobe of silk, cashmere, and carefully chosen necklines. She knew exactly what effect she had. She'd been a luxury interior design consultant in Northern Virginia, telling wealthy men what color to paint their living rooms while they stared at her and agreed. Her husband was a defense contractor who traveled 40 weeks a year. I met him once. A tired-looking man in a golf shirt nodded from his driveway and went inside. Pamela drove a pearl-white Lexus LX with vanity plates reading RDGCRST and parked across 2 spaces at the community mailbox cluster because she believed door dings were class warfare. 7 months after moving in, she ran unopposed for HOA president. The previous president, retired Principal Gene Toiver, had stepped down because his wife was ill. Only 9 people attended the meeting. 7 voted for Pamela. They thought they were getting a pretty neighbor who organized potlucks. They got a dictator in designer heels. Within 60 days, Pamela issued 17 compliance notices. She fined a retired firefighter for parking a camper in his driveway, demanded an 80-year-old widow repaint her mailbox because the green shade wasn't part of a palette Pamela had invented, and made herself the sole member of a visual standards board. She required approval for everything, including vegetable gardens. She ordered a family to remove a wildflower garden, demanded a Vietnam veteran shorten his flagpole by 3 inches, fined a night shift nurse named Angela RWS for a bicycle rack, and cited retired electrician Ray Purvis for a motion sensor light installed after a bear raided his trash. 3 families moved out during her first year because of how she enforced the rules. She delivered notices personally in heeled boots and silk, touching an arm and speaking sweetly while explaining why someone's home disappointed the community. It was cruelty dressed as caring. Jean told me over coffee, I thought she wanted to organize potlucks. I stayed out of her path, I said. My property wasn't part of Ridgewest Heights. I wasn't subject to the HOA. I was the man who owned the bridge that made her kingdom accessible. That arrangement lasted 18 months. In October 2022, a new homeowner asked on Facebook whether the old bridge was safe for a moving truck. Pamela replied that the HOA was addressing a long-standing concern. She posted photos from angles that made weathered oak look like ruins and questioned the load capacity, even though it was rated at 22 tons. Then she came to my property. I was stacking firewood behind the barn when she arrived in the Lexus, engine running, door open, arms crossed and one hip cocked. We need to talk about your bridge. My bridge is fine, Miss Davenport. It is revolting. She looked at my torn flannel and dirt-streak hands. Look at yourself. Look at that bridge. You match. My residents paid $400,000 to $900,000 for their homes, and the first thing they see is rusty steel and rotting wood from a condemned logging camp. It's disgusting. I want it gone. That bridge has a 22-ton rating and passed inspection 7 months ago. I don't care about inspections. I care what it looks like. I've wiped my shoes on things worth more than your timber operation. It's an embarrassment. It's my property. Your HOA has no authority over it. She smiled. We'll see about that, sweetheart. For 3 months Pamela ran a campaign. She sent 4 official-looking letters demanding I upgrade the bridge to community standards she had invented. She hired Warren Cobb, a handyman who pressure washed decks for $35 an hour, to produce a professional structural assessment declaring imminent failure. She mailed it to homeowners, the county building department, the board of supervisors, and VDO. County Inspector Dale Shiflett, whom I'd worked with during my vote years, inspected the bridge and called me. Wyatt, your bridge is fine. Better than half the county bridges. VDO said the private bridge was outside its jurisdiction. Pamela turned to public pressure. She created a next-door propaganda page with titles like Our Children Cross This Every Day, and One Man's Stubbornness Worth Your Child's Life. One post used a stock photo of a collapsed bridge in Guatemala. She tagged me, posted my property records, and captioned a satellite image. This is the man who controls your only road. Dorothy Ferris, a retired teacher, told me Pamela had created a Bridge Safety Moms group text sending infrastructure disasters at 6:15 every morning, always ending, "This could be us. Call Wyatt Jennings." At the February 2023 HOA meeting, Pamela proposed assessing each household $1,200 to fund legal action. Her 22-slide PowerPoint included a risk matrix and a photo of a school bus from another state. Jean Toiver asked what legal theory she intended to use. "Safety trumps property rights," Pamela said. "Not in Patrick County," Jean replied. The motion passed 5-33. The 5 yes votes came from men who had never disagreed with Pamela. She collected $45,600, hired an attorney from Roanoke, and sued, claiming 20 years of use had created a prescriptive easement. Roy produced the original license and pointed to paragraph 9, written in capitals. No use would ever constitute a prescriptive easement or public right-of-way. The judge dismissed the complaint in 11 days, calling it bordering on frivolous. Pamela's attorney withdrew the next week. That should have ended it. But Pamela believed beauty, her neighborhood, and her world were rights she could enforce. My bridge was the ugly thing obstructing her curated mountain enclave. She called demolition contractors until she found Blue Ridge Hauling and Demolition, a 2-man operation run by Tommy Spence out of Henry County. She told Tommy the bridge was HOA property condemned by the county, paid him $8,000 cash, and scheduled the work for Saturday morning. She didn't tell the board or homeowners. Her husband asked, "Pamela, are you sure?" She told him to worry about his defense contracts. Saturday, March 18, 2023, I was at a timber auction in Floyd County. At 8:15, my neighbor Harold Clemens called. "Wyatt, there's an excavator on your bridge." Harold filmed the 47-minute demolition from his cabin porch. The video captured oak planks cracking, steel I-beams groaning as they were pulled from abutments that had held for 62 years, and Tommy's partner saying, "Man, this thing's built like a tank. You sure they want it down?" Across the gorge, Pamela stood in white linen and a silk scarf, watching through binoculars. I reached home an hour and 40 minutes later. The bridge was gone. The 4 beams lay twisted and half submerged in the creek bed 52 feet below. Oak splinters covered the rocks, the locust railings were piled on the east rim, and the abutments were cracked and gouged. I stood at the west rim, looking across empty air toward 38 families who now had no road. Harold asked, "Does that woman know what she just did?" "Not yet." I called the sheriff and Roy. Roy listened, then said, "Don't rebuild. Don't clean up. Document everything. Don't talk to her." Roy, 38 families have no way out. That's not your bridge to replace anymore. It's evidence. Pamela had not blocked my operation. She had blocked herself. Every worker, school bus, ambulance, and fire engine now depended on a Forest Service road that was closed for the season. The consequences began within hours. By Saturday evening, 11 homeowners tried the detour. 3 made it, 2 got stuck in mud, and 6 turned around. By Sunday, all 38 families were functionally landlocked. Pediatrician Aaron Patel had to tell his clinic in Martinsville he couldn't leave his neighborhood. Stacy Milner, 8 months pregnant, asked the fire department whether a helicopter could evacuate her if labor began. They couldn't guarantee it. Her husband drove her to her mother's home in Stewart, The trip took 2 hours and 14 minutes, and she had contractions the whole way. Jean Toiver confronted Pamela about ambulance access. She told him she'd handle it and shut the door. Monday, the school bus reached the gorge and turned around. 7 children missed school. Fire Marshal Frank Holliday designated Ridgewest Heights a restricted access area. I've seen subdivisions with bad roads, he said. I've never seen one with no road at all. By Tuesday, homeowners sued the HOA and Pamela for gross negligence, breach of fiduciary duty, and $60,000 to $90,000 in lost value per home. Wednesday, a Roanoke television crew filmed the empty gorge and the subdivision above it like a castle with its drawbridge burned. The segment spread 42,000 times in 2 days. A commenter wrote, "That's not karma. That's a screenplay." Pamela told the Martinsville Bulletin she had acted in the community's best interest, then hung up when asked which community she meant. Thursday, Pamela drove to my property on the Forest Service Road. Her pearl-white Lexus was caked in red clay, scratched along the passenger side, dented at the bumper, and had bent running boards. Her auburn hair was tied with a rubber band, mascara streaked her face, her silk blouse was stained, and one designer boot heel was cracked. "Mr. Jennings," she said, her voice small and fractured, "I need you to rebuild the bridge." I kept sharpening my chain. After 10 seconds, I said, "No, I don't believe I will." "You don't understand. People can't get out." "I understand perfectly. I inspected bridges for 18 years." She had finally discovered that beauty could not make a 52-foot gorge disappear. Roy explained the legal situation: felony destruction of property because the bridge was worth more than $50,000, criminal trespass, fraud for lying to Tommy, automatic termination of the license when the excavator touched the first board, and no obligation, legal, moral, or otherwise, to rebuild. I contacted Tommy and told him the truth. Pamela had shown him a fake board resolution. Horrified, he hired an attorney and sued her for fraud. The next 4 weeks were the worst of Pamela's life. Week 1, Commonwealth's attorney Beth Cranford charged her with 2 felonies, destruction of property and obtaining money by false pretenses. A deputy drove the Forest Service Road 2 hours round trip to serve her. In yoga pants and no makeup, she read the charges and said, "This is a misunderstanding." Week 2, 23 homeowners filed a class action suit for breach of fiduciary duty, negligent destruction of infrastructure, and $85,000 per home, $3.2 million total. The HOA's insurance carrier denied coverage because the policy excluded willful acts. Week 3, 3 board members resigned, including 2 men who had always voted with Pamela. Jean returned as interim president and passed a unanimous resolution condemning her actions. He called me about a dialysis patient whose suspension had been destroyed, Erin's exhausting commute, and Stacy's baby being born at her mother's house. "Is there anything we can talk about?" he asked. "Not while the criminal case is pending," I said. "Afterward, I'm willing to talk." Week 4, Pamela's third attorney filed an emergency motion demanding that I grant temporary access under public necessity. Judge Harlow, who had dismissed her easement claim, heard it Friday. Roy stood and said, "Your Honor, the defendant destroyed the plaintiff's bridge without permission or legal authority. She now asks this court to force the plaintiff to provide what she destroyed. This is not an equity case. This is a consequences case." The judge denied the motion. "Counsel, your client tore down the only bridge into her own neighborhood and now asks the man she victimized to build her a new one. The court is not going to reward that behavior." Pamela sat in the defendant's chair, no longer behind the HOA podium. Her third attorney withdrew the following Monday. The criminal case ended in June. Pamela pleaded guilty to felony destruction of property, paid full restitution, received 2 years of supervised probation, 300 hours of community service, and a permanent no-contact order barring her from my property. Beth Cranford told the court Pamela had shown breathtaking disregard for the property rights of others and the safety of her community. My suit settled in August for $310,000. Tommy's fraud suit settled for $62,000. The class action settled in October for $1.4 million. Total consequences, $1.77 million, all because Pamela spent $8,000 cash to destroy a bridge she thought was ugly. $8,000 to tear it down. $1.77 million in damages. A return on investment of about 22,000%, just not in the direction she planned. Pamela listed her house in September. The photographs showed mountain luxury, Italian marble, heated floors, a 60-bottle wine fridge, and a sunset deck. It sat for 61 days. Every buyer asked the same question: is the bridge situation resolved? After 37 showings, it sold in November for $212,000 less than she'd paid. In late September, Jean came to me with a proposal from the reconstituted board, accompanied by Aaron Patel and Dorothy Ferris. They asked whether I'd consider a new access agreement. Roy and I drafted a recorded permanent easement attached to the land. The HOA would pay for a new bridge, maintain a $3 million liability policy, and pay $4,800 annually for road maintenance. One final clause, Roy's idea, said any HOA officer who authorized modification, obstruction, or interference with Jennings' property would trigger a 5-year suspension of the easement, with all alternative access costs paid by the offender. Jean read it and looked at Roy. You want to make sure this never happens again. I want the next Pamela Davenport to know the price before she starts shopping, Roy said. The new bridge was completed in February 2024, a 52-foot steel and concrete span with proper guardrails, rated for 30 tons. It looks better than Grandpa Amos' original, but beneath the fresh concrete and powder-coated steel, the abutments still sit in the same holes Amos jackhammered into the limestone 63 years ago. The foundation was always sound. Pamela moved back to Milan in December. Harold watched her Lexus bump and scrape down the mountain one final time, its exhaust pipe dragging and vanity plate buried in mud. Last I heard, she joined another HOA in Fairfax County, where the board has no idea what just moved in. I imagine she's already measuring mailbox posts. Harold asked if I felt bad for her. I thought about the nurse she fined, the electrician she cited, the veteran she humiliated, the widow she made cry, and my grandfather's bridge twisted in the creek because Pamela thought rusty steel was ugly. No, Harold, I said. I don't. Some people never learn. But people like Pamela Davenport spend their lives believing they never have to. And that's where the story ends, or at least where the Pamela Davenport chapter ends. But I keep coming back to this. She had every warning. The county inspector told her the bridge was sound. The judge told her she had no authority. Her attorney told her to stop. She did it anyway because beauty had always meant right, and right had always meant she could do whatever she wanted. That's the real lesson. It's not about bridges, property lines, or license agreements. It's what happens when someone confuses personal beauty with personal authority, when I don't like how that looks becomes I have the right to destroy it. You don't get to destroy things because they don't belong to you. You never did. And the Lord will remind you if your neighbors don't. If this story hit you, hit subscribe, drop your thoughts in the comments, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. We've got another story next week about a woman who paved over a farmer's side road and discovered his family had owned the land since 1947. You don't want to miss it.